conversation about the renaming of the park. And of course, the initial conversation was just, it sort of engendered itself around just talk. We thought our ACM, and is Greg on with us today, Henry?
I don't think, yeah, he's here. He's on.
Gregory Tucker's here, yeah.
He's on.
Hey, Greg. Hey, how are you?
Hello.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for being here. Dr. Donaldson, thank you for being here with us and taking time out of your schedule to come. And of course, Robin, again, thank you for lending both you and Dr. Donaldson an opportunity to share with us some insights as it relates to the renaming of the park. Robert, again, thank you. Long time no see. At some point in time, send me something. Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. What I want to do is sort of turn this over to our ACM, Henry. Go for it.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Chair, Councilman McDowell, Councilman Duvall, Councilman Davis. Thank you all so much. Thank you to our city manager that's, of course, with us today. Ms. Wilson, do you want to make any preliminary comments before I proceed?
No, go right ahead, Henry. Thank you.
Okay. So as we previously discussed, we wanted to bring some subject matter experts to provide some recommendations on the naming of the Bull Street Park. And we also want to allow, as we described earlier, the Hughes Development Corporation to provide some input on this as well. So today we have Dr. Bobby Donaldson with us, who is a professor at the University of South Carolina. And he is also the director of the Center for Civil Rights History and Research. And he has been serving at the University of South Carolina 20 years, which is the best university in the state of South Carolina. Thank you very much, Dr. Donaldson, for being here today. We also have Robin Waits with us, who is the director of Historic Columbia. Ms. Waits has been serving as director since 2004 and has been with the organization since 2002. So thank you, Robin, for being here as well. We also have the president of the Hughes Development Corporation with us, Mr. Robert Hughes. Thank you so much, sir, for being here with us. And what we want to do is we want to allow Dr. Bobby Donaldson as well as Robin Waits to provide their recommendations to the committee. And then we will follow with some comments by Mr. Hughes as well. So I'm going to turn this over to Dr. Bobby Donaldson to lead us through those recommendations.
Well, thank you very much, Henry, and good afternoon, everyone. Rob and I are both excited to offer some commentary. I won't use the word recommendations just yet, but some historical insights. This has been a really revealing assignment for me, Councilman McDowell. I thought I knew a lot about Columbia history, and the more we started digging literally into the records about the Bull Street property, we're reminded there's much more to uncover and to document. And so some of the suggestions and recommendations that we have today, some of them are widely known. I think some of them are not known at all. And I agree with Councilman Duvall that perhaps beyond just naming a space, this affords us a unique opportunity to dig into our history, to revise part of that history, and to literally reconstruct some of the history. And so I'm excited to be a part of this undertaking. Historic Columbia has created a list of recommendations, all of which I support and concur with. After Robin provides some insight about their work, then I'll turn to some additional names that have come to my attention over the last 2 weeks. So, Mr. Simons, can I share my screen? Is that doable? All right, let's see.
Sure.
Yes, you should be good.
Do you see that?
Yes.
You see? Okay. All right. So this is the space of which we're speaking. Really an extraordinary space. And as I went there 2 weeks ago and stood there and looked in every direction, it was very clear to me that this was going to be an extraordinary contribution to the city of Columbia, not only its landscape, but in addition to naming it for an individual or for individuals, I think it will be also a place of contemplation. And so I very much underscore any efforts to use this space as a classroom as well about the history of Columbia. Historic Columbia has delved into their own archives and have looked closely at some appropriate naming opportunities. And so I'll turn it over to Robin Waits, the Executive Director of Historic Columbia, to go through that list of recommendations. So Robin?
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Dr. Donaldson. This is a list of six recommendations or options that our staff has pulled together, and Dr. Donaldson was kind enough to pull this into a presentation. So just want to start out with a family that was certainly significant to Columbia. Interestingly, the Bull Street campus was established on what was formerly the Wallace plantation, and Clarissa and Samuel Thompson were enslaved on that plantation. So there's a connection to the site in terms of some of the early members of that family. But there are also three prominent children of Clarissa and Samuel Thompson, two of whom have a direct connection to the Bull Street campus, and one of whom was well known in Columbia. The first of those is Samuel Benjamin Thompson. Samuel Thompson was one of 4 delegates from Richland County elected to the 1868 Constitutional Convention, and he subsequently served 4 terms in the South Carolina House of Representatives. So he's one of our well-known Reconstruction era elected officials. He was simultaneously active in local government, serving as trial justice, city councilman, and coroner. And Samuel Thompson actually served on the Board of Regents for the state asylum, at least briefly as we know, in 1873. His brother, E.B. Thompson, was one of the founders of St. Luke's Episcopal Church. He was an organizer of the city's Emancipation Day, and he was also the steward of the asylum for most of Reconstruction. And as the steward of the asylum, he would have lived on the campus. And then Caroline Thompson Alston, who many of you probably recognize that name, recently was in the news with the acquisition by Jennifer Clyburn Reed of her former home on Gervais Street. Caroline Alston was one of the city's first Black businesswomen. She lived and worked on that property on Gervais Street. And then the daughter of Samuel Benjamin Thompson was Clarissa Thompson Allen. And she actually lived just around the corner from the campus on Henderson Street. She graduated from the South Carolina State Normal School alongside Celia Dial Saxon, so one of the early attendees to the University of South Carolina when it was first integrated. Ms. Allen taught both at Howard School and Allen University, and is known beyond Columbia for the publication of a series of articles that fictionalized Columbia in 1885 to 1886. So when we look at this is kind of a family option to recognize the Thompsons, and would give us an opportunity to really delve into a variety of narratives around Columbia. We think having an opportunity to talk about the foundation of that campus on a plantation is very important in terms of the breadth of Columbia's history, and highlighting a family that certainly moved beyond enslavement in ways that were quite significant locally as well as on a statewide level. And the image that you see on the left is of Clarissa Thompson Allen. So this is the granddaughter of the couple that was born, or that was enslaved by the Wallace family. And the gravestone, Dr. Donaldson, at Randolph.
Correct.
Is there anything you want to add to that, Dr. Donaldson, to the Thompson?
No, I'll just say, this is there are some things about this particular recommendation I did not know. And I'll just simply say Clarissa Thompson, the granddaughter of these Reconstruction figures, the daughter, she leaves Columbia and goes off to a career as a teacher in Texas. But as Robin mentioned, she becomes a very well-known writer, and it is argued that she is one of the very first African-American female novelists in the country, whose roots are right here on the Bull Street property.
The next individual is Dr. Alonzo McClennan. And McClennan actually was a nephew of E.B. Thompson. So he was a ward of E.B. Thompson as a young man. So when E.B. Thompson was again the steward at the Bull Street campus. So it's very likely that McClellan would have lived on the Bull Street campus as a young man. Dr. McClellan attended Benedict Institute in Columbia. He was later appointed as a legislative page when his uncle Samuel Thompson served in the legislature. He was also the second Black midshipman at the United States Naval Academy in 1893. So when Annapolis integrated, McClennan was actually one of two. He attended Howard School of Medicine. He's really better known in Charleston because that's where he ended up practicing and was very involved in the establishment of training for nurses. He established the first Black-owned pharmacy in Charleston. One of the recommendations from my staff is that as a Columbian, this could be an opportunity to sort of reclaim Dr. McClennan as our own. I think there's also an opportunity as we look at how Robert, you might and Henry, y'all might want to tell this story. If the Thompson family is one that is selected, certainly Dr. McClennan could be part of that as a ward and family member of the Thompson family.
The only thing I'll add about Dr. McClennan is just like his cousin, Clarissa, he also was a student at the University of South Carolina during the Reconstruction time period.
The next person is Paige Ellington. Ellington is best known as a self-taught architect in Columbia. Mr. Ellington was also born enslaved by a Mr. McCulley in Columbia. He was actually born in North Carolina and was relocated to South Carolina. His contemporaries, both Black and white, recognize his skill both as a builder and as an architect. And it is believed that he was actively engaged in design and construction on the Bull Street campus. So there's an article from 1910, The State, that detailed his close partnership with Dr. James W. Babcock. And this is just a quote from that article. He has assisted Dr. Babcock with all of the new buildings at the state hospital, and it will be observed that the towers all differ in appearance. Paige Ellington has, through postcards and encyclopedias, informed himself upon the detail of the most renowned turrets and steeples and spires and towers in all parts of the world, and has exhibited not a little taste in fitting designs to new buildings. So again, it's unclear exactly how engaged he was, but he certainly was engaged across the Bull Street campus. We're not sure if he was engaged with Babcock, but are still trying to kind of find out more information about Mr. Ellington. It certainly is possible that he was part of the design for Babcock because it had the same contractor for two of the iterations, two of the construction periods, 1857 to 1858 and 1880 to 1882.
Robin.
I'll say too that Dr. Babcock, who's written about Ellington, is very clear that the campus would not be the campus it is without Ellington's support and work on the campus. In addition to being a very skilled laborer, brick mason, and architect, Paige Ellington was also very involved in city politics in Columbia. During the Reconstruction era, he was a member of the Board of Health for the city. He served along with Richard T. Greener, the first African-American professor at the University of South Carolina. He ran for city council in 1875. And he also was an elections manager during the Reconstruction period. He is also associated with three historic churches. He was a member of the Washington Street Methodist Church, When the Black members of that church broke off to start their own congregation, that led to the founding of Bethel AME. He was a part of that congregation, and then later became a member of Latson Presbyterian. It is thought that the building, the Latson current sanctuary on Sumter Street, may have been built by a Page Ellington. So a really extraordinary individual whose story needs to be more widely known.
Dr. Donaldson.
Yes.
And Robin also, I have been loaned this book on the asylum doctor. And among the things that it says that Page Ellington built on the campus was the Parker building, which I know where that is, but it also mentions the Taylor building, the Talley building, and the North building. Are those buildings still standing? Are they parts of what we call the Babcock building that was built in 12 stages?
I do not know the answer to that, Mr. Duvall, but can certainly look into that. I don't know if Robert, in your work.
No, the only one I know that's still standing is the Parker Annex building. I don't believe there was a original Parker building. I believe that is the building that burned. In terms of the Talley building, the North building, and some of the others, if they existed when we got here, I've never even heard of them. We do have a Talley Street in honor of the Talley building that stood, but I don't know when or where or what happened to it.
It also says he did the bakery. Robert, isn't the bakery still up?
The bakery is where SoCo is located, yes.
Okay.
And Councilman Duvall, just so people know, you're reading, those are the records from Dr. Babcock, who's giving him the credit for those construction projects.
Right.
Right.
And it says he was born in 1835, Robin, in case you need another reference.
Okay. Yeah, I think in the Babcock papers, which are housed in the South Carolina Library, there actually is a small autobiography. I think that Ellington dictated to someone that where some of that information is gleaned in the records. Okay. Anything else on Mr. Ellington?
Dr. J.D. Harris he was an assistant physician at the asylum for much of 1870. This was a really high profile appointment for a Black physician at the time. He was actually only there for a year, if that. He was pushed out of that position soon after he arrived. And he wrote that the reason for this was solely and purely, this is a quote, solely and purely because of the prejudices which exist against my color and race. On these terms, I can afford to be relieved. On these terms, I can afford to suffer both insult and injury. But whether anyone can afford to insult and injure another on account of color is a question which time will determine. So Dr. Harris spent relatively little of his career in South Carolina, but he certainly was a figure of national significance, and his decision to come here to work is a really important episode in his life. Dr. Harris, of the six recommendations that we have, is the only individual who was not enslaved. He was born a free person of color in North Carolina and made the choice to come to South Carolina, which is a different situation than the other individuals we'll talk about today. So kind of tangential, if you will, to the story, but the fact that he was here, an assistant physician in 1870, is an important thing to keep in mind.
So again, so Dr. Harris is credited as being the first African-American physician on the Bull Street campus. He was also a Union Army surgeon during the Civil War, and also a member of the Freedmen's Bureau, who enabled in the transition from slavery to freedom in 1865 and 66. Okay.
Senator Nash's connection to the campus, he was chair of the Asylum Board of Regents for several years. Like Samuel Thompson, Senator Nash was among the 4 electors from Richland County who attended that 1868 Constitutional Convention, and was one of the individuals who made significant contributions to that document. He was elected to the South Carolina Senate in 1868 and served until the end of Reconstruction, 1877. Mr. Nash was formerly enslaved by William Campbell Preston, who was president of South Carolina College. He was self-taught like the Thompson brothers, but nonetheless became one of the most influential and well-respected politicians in Richland County. He first came to prominence in 1867 after arguing that the city was illegally keeping Black taxpayers from accessing the poorhouse. The Freedmen's Bureau sided with Nash, although little was ultimately done prior to the massive government changes that began to occur in 1868. So Nash is one of those individuals who I think when we talk about the Reconstruction era is really a key figure for South Carolina, and does have some connection to the Bull Street campus as from his service on the Board of Regents.
And Senator Nash was probably one of the wealthiest and most influential African Americans in the city during the Reconstruction period. He is actually featured in the new African American History Museum in Washington, D.C. The Pearson Funeral Home in Columbia today, the founders of the funeral home are descendants of Senator Nash. He owned a great deal of what is now Arsenal Hill. The Arsenal Hill Presbyterian Church on the corner of Blanding and Assembly was actually the site of Senator Nash's home through much of the Reconstruction period. And he's also one of the founders of the historic Randolph Cemetery and is buried on that site.
The final individual who we have a recommendation for, and again, because of his association with the campus, is Benjamin H. Campbell. He worked at the asylum in the 1880s and perhaps earlier than that. Before emancipation, Campbell was enslaved by John Crawford, who was known to have maintained a greenhouse and avidly pursued horticulture. The Clarkson House is on the corner of Blanding. It still stands on the corner of Blanding and Bull Street, and was known for its landscapes. We don't know a lot about Benjamin Campbell, but his story, his engagement in horticulture certainly would provide an opportunity to talk about some of the horticultural therapy that occurred on the campus, as well as exploration of the types of plants that were used. So we put the recommendations that we had kind of in some order. Campbell is, again, an important name to remember, not necessarily at the level of the Thompson or McClennan, but we wanted to offer him as well.
So Robin,
Yes,
so what you've done here, if I understand correctly, we prioritized the names that you're recommending, correct?
we did, yes.
Okay, thank you.
I think part of that, Councilman McDowell, is, an individual like Senator Nash is such an important figure in Columbia and certainly has a connection to the campus. I think there are going to be opportunities throughout the city to recognize Senator Nash, and there may be others who have a more direct connection to the campus that might not make sense in other places in the community. So that is also part of the consideration in at least those 6 that we have. I know Dr. Donaldson has some other thoughts.
Now, the number of buildings that Mr. Babcock, I shouldn't say introduced, but the number of buildings on the campus that were contributions of Mr. Ellington, numbered how many?
I don't know that off the top of my head, but we can certainly go back and look at that.
Okay.
I think that's in the book that Councilman Duvall referenced. We can get that to you.
Okay. What's the name of that book?
Asylum Doctor
Asylum.
by Charles Bryan.
And I think Dr. Bryan is probably one of the most knowledgeable people about the Bull Street property and knows a great deal about Page Ellington and could probably give some additional detail about his career and his contributions.
Okay, thank you.
And I'll say too, Councilman McDowell, those are the ordered recommendations of Historic Columbia. I don't challenge or endorse them at the moment. I'm still meditating on this, in part because, as Councilman Duvall mentioned, somehow or another there was a story in the state newspaper that I think mentioned our names, and then it led to a series of phone calls and emails from various people. And so I'm just simply reporting to you what was given to me. And if I need to make recommendations, I'll be glad to do so. So among the additional names that came to our attention is one that's very obvious, Dr. Matilda Evans, the second African-American woman in South Carolina to receive a license to practice medicine, very prominent civic leader. Already one of the major thoroughfares in the Bull Street campus is named for her. She treated a number of patients, or at the time called inmates, from the asylum. Her name has come to our attention as well. Another name that has come to our attention who had an association with the Bull Street property was a man named I.S. Levy, the original I.S. Levy, who was, as it says in this flyer, the undertaker for the state hospital complex. Mr. Levy, in addition to being a prominent businessman, was deeply involved in civil rights, one of the founders of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, a close advisor to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and the real force of the Republican Party in South Carolina for much of the early part of the 20th century. In addition, he also had a very prominent business in the historic African-American business corridor on Washington Street. Another name associated with the Bull Street community is the Reverend James M. Hinton, a World War II veteran, a very prominent insurance agent in Columbia, and for a long period of time, the president of the South Carolina NAACP. He was also the pastor of the 2nd Calvary Baptist Church when it was located on Bull Street. And during his tenure as pastor of 2nd Calvary, he was a chaplain for Negro patients in the state asylums, both in Bull Street and also at what is now Crafts Farrow. He was a very prominent member of the Waverly community and lived on Height Street. And as best I recall, beyond a state marker in front of the site of his home, there is very little else about that chronicles Hinton's contributions in the city. Another minister associated with, particularly not necessarily Bull Street, but with the Crafts Farrow property is the Reverend C.J. Whitaker. There was a time, maybe 2 generations ago, you could not run for office in Columbia without sitting on his front porch. He was a real leader in getting out the vote from the Greenview community. If anybody wants to know now why Greenview is such a prominent force in the city, it is because of Reverend Whitaker. He was the president of what was called the North Columbia Civic Club, which still exists. He was a minister in the North Columbia area, but he was also an employee of the Crafts Farrow facility as part of the state mental health properties. There is now a street sign that honors Reverend Whitaker in the Greenview community. Another name that's obvious is Modjeska Monteith Simkins. There's a great deal in Columbia about her life. But Ms. Simkins was, in addition to being a strong civil rights leader, a very strong champion of African-American public health, including mental health. And throughout the later part of the 60s, she was one of the sharpest critics of the mental health conditions facing African Americans, both at the Bull Street property and also at Crafts Farrow. She pushed for the integration of the medical practitioners there. She did this in collaboration with another organization that is not as widely known as her work with the NAACP, but it's a name that also came to our attention. Someone said it should be called the Citizens Park for the Richland County Citizens Committee. And this was an organization largely of women who joined Ms. Simkins in both voter registration campaigns, challenging the segregation in public schools, but also challenging the living conditions of inmates, of patients in state mental health properties. One of the more prominent voices in the Citizens Committee was a woman named Miss Beatrice McKnight, who was later a real force in the Urban League. Another name that came to our attention is Dr. Harry Wright, who is a graduate of the University of South Carolina, the Wharton School of Business at UPenn, and also received his medical degree from the University of Pennsylvania. Dr. Wright was probably one of the most prominent African-American child psychiatrists in the country. He did his early work at the, it's called the William S. Hall Psychiatric Institute on the Bull Street property. He's also one of the early supporters of what is now the Mann Simons Cottage under the stewardship of Historic Columbia. Now, ironically, John C. Bull, a physician, was a graduate of Claflin University and the Meharry School of Medicine. He was a prominent civil rights leader and physician in Spartanburg, but he was the first African-American member of the State Mental Health Commission, appointed, I believe, in the late 1960s. And so he is the first African-American member of that organization. So imagine the Bull Street Park, the Bull Park on the Bull Street property, named for someone who is certainly very deserving of such recognition. Now, I want to conclude with a name that's come up before, a name you've probably never heard of, but whose name was Hillard Bell. I spoke this morning to his granddaughter, whose name is Lavinia Sims Patterson, who's from the Booker Washington Heights community. And she has vivid memories of visiting her grandfather, Hillard Bell, who was the cook on the Bull Street property. His home, she said, was near the corner of Elmwood, the corner of Hardin and Calhoun, in that area, not too far from where the park is located. Mrs. Patterson, when the Bull Street baseball facility was built, told me that she wrote a letter to City Council and never got a response back. And she very much wanted to call the stadium, the arena, the Bull Stadium. And she did so because she wanted to recognize not only her grandfather, but all of the African Americans who lived and worked on the property, who were largely overlooked or forgotten. And so Hillard Bell would be one of those people recognized in a People's Park on the facility. And that brings me back to Page Ellington. The more I've read about him, the more I'm fascinated and intrigued by him. If Dr. Babcock is right, so much of that space that we now celebrate was a direct result of his labors. I was glad to see his name on the list of Historic Columbia. I think we should give his name serious consideration, in part because it's not just about Page Ellington. It's about all the largely unknown figures who lived and worked on that property, who built it, and it caused it to sustain at the level it has to date. So I'm really excited about all these names, but incredibly excited about the possibility of recognizing Page Ellington's contributions in some respect. Mr. Simons, that is our report. We'll be glad to entertain any questions people may have.
Mr. Chairman, the comments that I got after the state newspaper article, the one about Page Ellington came from Craig Pierce, who used to be on county council and is now chairman of the Mental Health Commission for South Carolina. He's the one that sent me this information, and from that information he sent me, I got the book, The Asylum Doctor, and have enjoyed. I'm about halfway through it right now. But he also said that 2021 is the 200th anniversary of the founding of the Mental Health Institute, and the Mental Health Commission would be having a year-long celebration about mental health facility in South Carolina and the Bull Street property and everything else. So I am just overwhelmed with the research that y'all have done and brought up all these other people that have made significant contributions that need to have some type of honor, either on Bull Street or in other appropriate places around the city for what they did during their time. But I think we need to look towards the Mental Health Commission also as doing some things for the Bull Street property during their 200th anniversary. Not many organizations can say we've been here 200 years.
Well, just a word of thanks to both Robin and Dr. Donaldson for this is a list. Everybody ought to have something on Bull Street according to this list here. It is just absolutely wonderful to hear some of the names recognized and recommended. Of course, there are several folk on there. Not that it was during my time, but Reverend C.J. Whitaker knew him well when I pastored here in Columbia. He was, and I think you're right, Dr. Donaldson. He was a kingmaker. He was a kingmaker in North Columbia. If you wanted to run for an office, he was the person to talk to. He could either make you or tell you to go home and continue to work for a living. But he was certainly an astronomical man. So you've given us some work to do because as this project continues to evolve, it is our task to, as a committee, to of course come up with a name, and of course pass that on to council. So this is real valuable information. We won't do that today. It's going to perhaps facilitate another meeting from us to kind of go through all of the materials that we've already heard from you guys, because we hadn't heard from Robert yet. And we need to hear from Robert. Robert, give to us what you're thinking and what the huge company is thinking about. Yes, sir.
Thank you for the opportunity to be a part of this, Reverend McDowell and everyone, and Dr. Donaldson and Robin. That was awesome. I'm clicking away and typing so much. People share all of those names with us, and I look forward to. I've learned a lot, but I know there's a lot more to learn than what was first. A genuine thank you for all the work that you did, and I'm very excited about work that's been done in the process, and what I think is going to be a really neat opportunity to showcase some of the history that's been less told and deserves to be told. And Dr. Donaldson, one of the first things you said was, you believe, and we certainly believe, that the park needs to be a classroom. One of the things we've said about Bull Street from very early on is the history on this campus is something to be celebrated, to be learned from, and not to be forgotten. So it's important that we tell all parts of that story, and we be sure to take opportunities when we have to tell us, and the park is the perfect place to do that. We're going to do it not only the history of human beings and their input and impact on the site, not only the history of mental health, we're also going to do it in the environmental impact of having some of the decisions made in the park that I know Gregory Tucker mentioned at the last meeting, some of the things that have happened inside the park from an environmental standpoint that are really, we think, never been done before in our country. But are going to have a great impact on the ecology of some of our urban streams and flooding conditions downstream. So the park is going to be a place of learning, and the list you guys put together is, I don't know, I'm incredibly excited about it. I'm also excited that a lot of some of the names on that list have already been on our radar, and we've already begun honoring them. You mentioned Dr. Matilda Evans, and we were really excited at the opportunity to name one of the streets here after Dr. Matilda Evans, but we also have already named a street after Dr. McClennan. And one of the streets very near the park, run parallel to Gregg Street, is McClennan Street. And another name that's not on the list, and I think could have been, not quite the tie to the park or to Bull Street, but Septima Poinsett Clark, one of the first, a graduate of Benedict College, an African-American teacher here, a huge, had a huge impact during the civil rights movement. We've submitted recently to name a street in what we've called the Tech Village, Septima Street. And so honoring her and all of her contributions to the history of Columbia and her time, her 17 years spent here as a school teacher. So something that is obviously important to the district, and this list will help us with more names and more opportunities to tell some stories and be sure we're doing that the right way. One thing that we have, an idea that we have had that I think could be additive to this process, and something that we think would be really fun for the community, for the district, gain interest not only in the names that were listed today, potentially some others that we might have missed, but also if we did a more of a public process, a naming contest of sorts like the baseball team did, find a way to really engage the public and get information, again, about these people and the impact that they've had. These ideas, get them out into the public realm and use, I think no one here wants to have a total open voting public contest. But I think having some kind of a public input period and allowing this process to be really broad could be something really fun for the district and for all the different groups that deserve recognition. Because one thing was clear to me after the presentation you guys just made, it's that everyone on that list deserves to be honored and recognized for the contributions that they made to this city, to this state, and most of them specifically to this site. So that's the only thing we think we can bring to the table to this, is eventually leveraging our networks, social media networks, our distribution list, the folks in the neighborhoods around Bull Street that we're constantly trying to engage, the folks that are working at Bull Street today, and potentially use that as an opportunity to showcase all of these names, not just in a couple committee meetings, but really try to push it out broadly and get a lot of input, feedback, and spotlight on these folks that really have done some amazing things for our state.
Thank you, Robert. Sam?
Yeah. Let me say that I think, I congratulate Robert and Dr. Dawson for the research and a lot of the information. I've known some people who can validate the presentation. I'm one of the ones that have sat in Rep. Whitaker's living room, and I worked with Modjeska Simkins, known September Clark, and folks like that, and I can attest to what they mean to this city and the progress of the city of Columbia. I think I'm a traditionalist, and I kind of think that we need to make sure that we hold true to the commitment we've made with Bull Street, in that number one, it would be a showplace, but it also would reflect the commitments we made as far as the economic impact. And one of the things, again, that one of the hidden, I think, gratitudes of all of this is that with some of the folks that we're sort of highlighting, they some did not have the real pleasure of economic success, although their efforts and their tasks contributed to the I think the success of others, and I think that's one of the things that I'm hoping that we, in some form or fashion, that's part of the message that when we talk about impact, and each one of the people we talked about represent impact in their own way. So as long as we continue this process, I'm asking, and I'm certain they'll keep that in mind, because I will also. I think the information is some of it is some eye openers for me. I've had a relationship with mental health and that facility over I guess the property over the years in a different form. How would you remember when the Department of Mental Health and the Department of Mental Retardation were one, and then they separated?
Yeah.
And a lot of folks some were born in that facility. I think some of their family members are now living throughout the communities in South Carolina and not in an institution, because of some of the groundwork that was laid on that campus. Yes.
I was going to say, I was going to ask Mr. Chairman and Robert. Robert, how do you want us to ask you to do a public relations or public campaign to ask for suggestions on that? What do you need from us to get going on that?
My understanding, and I've not read the policy and the procedure that needs to be followed from the city to name something like the park. But my understanding is that regardless of, we can seek as much we should seek public, and that's my desire. But ultimately, this committee, the 3 council members on this committee, will make the ultimate decision. We wrote a rough outline of something we thought could be a public process. We've secured the domain name bullstreetpark.com. We think it would be a fun exercise to require folks or to encourage folks to go onto the website and give a name, any reasons and supporting evidence why that name it makes sense, their contact information, and then get back together. What we put out there was get back together with this group, including Robin and Dr. Donaldson, and review those names, look through, see if I imagine, I think I counted 14 or 15 suggestions from today. I imagine all of those, you could definitely come up with 10, but come up with, say, 10 or so that we think are worth more comment and more feedback, and present those back to the community and let the community provide additional color or insight or feedback on those ideas, and then take that feedback as a group and say, guys, this is, there's consensus, hopefully there has to be consensus among the 3 of you, but hopefully everybody rallies behind one name, one way in which to honor that park name and the right thing to do. And then recommend, I think that would have to go from the committee to the full city council. City council then vote on that name, approve that name, and then hopefully we can do that, I was thinking, in 60 days-ish, and then sometime later this spring, as the grass is growing great in the park and the park is blooming, we have a true opening of the park, a true event. Hopefully events will be okay by then, or a little more okay, but definitely be outdoors, and we try to have some kind of celebration to honor the opening of the park, the strides that we've made inside the Bull Street District, and whatever the name of the park is. Folks that were involved in helping choose that name, from the person that submits it on the internet to the family that is involved, if it's a name of a family, and folks related and tied into that family, to bring everyone together and have really a true ceremony and celebration of that. Sure. And use that whole time as a way, when we put those 10 ideas out into the public for comment, we really try hard to be sure all can get some time in the sun, really get a spotlight shown on them, and let their stories be told, knowing that we have to pick one. There's only one park at Bull Street, but hopefully it then means that the other 9, all the other ones we're putting out there, get some time in the sun, and then we can all work to find other ways, either inside the district or elsewhere, to be sure that the proper respects are paid to everyone that deserves it.
Sure.
That sounds like a very good plan.
One of the things that we talked about initially, and I think both Howard and Sam sort of heard that, was that we needed to have not only the input of Robin and Dr. Donaldson, but also to get some public input in terms of the names. We did not want to do this hurriedly, but we wanted to do it in such a way that persons, so it could be transparent, that a committee just doesn't come up with a name that I think Howard had a name initially, and we decided that's when we needed some help.
Y'all didn't like Duval Park?
That's when we needed some help. Hey, so Robert, yeah, that's the process we talked about initially, because we want everybody to have, quote unquote, say some ownership into what's taking place on Bull Street. Now, I must say to you unequivocally, Septima Clark was a member of mine in Charleston.
Mhm.
So I knew her well. Actually, she lived around the corner from me. She taught at Freedom School. And of course, that's one of those names that we hear. We hear folks say Septima Punset Clark, but we don't know the history behind that. So to put a sign up with her name on that street sign means a lot. I think we've got a good start. I think the committee's work is before us. We will certainly would want to invite you all back again as we, the committee, of course, have conversation with what we've heard today. It has been very insightful. It has given each of us an opportunity to reflect on the contributions of every name that was raised. But I think the other side of that is getting the word out. Perhaps look at bullstreetpark.com and having folk to look at that, and perhaps them submitting some names. So it would give us an opportunity to bring it back to City Council for approval.
Mr. Chairman, can we ask that Robert and Henry coordinate with the publicity that goes out to the public, so that we make sure that the city has a good eye on what's being publicized? One thing that I'm thinking about is that the person, or if you're naming it for a person, the person's got to be dead. That's why we couldn't name it the ballpark.
Say it like that, Howard.
But if we could ask Robert to coordinate with Henry, I think that would let us get off to a good running start here to get this thing rolling and get some good publicity on it. And if we came up with, what was it, 10 names this afternoon, most of whom I had never heard of.
I've got 7 names.
We're likely to come up with a whole lot more if we put it out to the public and get a lot more things. But I think there's a lot more we can do than just name the park. I'm thinking about that walking trail. I think Dr. Donaldson would love to have the opportunity to decorate that walking trail with a bench seat with a little plaque there and saying this was so-and-so's cotton field or whatever we want to say. But it gives us an opportunity to do some education out there as well as the leisure park.
Sure. Well, if Henry could put that on his table, I don't know if he has room enough to put it on his table, but it
right
would certainly
under the pickleball.
It would certainly be good if Robert, if you and and Henry could work out that mechanism of getting things sort of off the ground as it relates to putting it out there. If we could do that, what you think?
That sounds great to me. I don't think we should take any step publicly without total coordination and buy-in from the city and really everybody on this call. So
right.
I'd love to work with you, Henry, on that.
We're not going to let you do that, Robert.
You should. You should.
This has been a very enlightening meeting, and I do want to thank Robin and Dr. Donaldson for coming up with this, and Robert, thank you for being with us this afternoon too. Although we'd much rather have Chandler.
I understand. I understand.
And please give her my regrets for not being in. I may just call her just to say hello. Thank you.
That'd be
Look,
great.
one of the things that I think is very needful, this will not be our last gathering. We will need to talk over a few things. The committee will meet, and of course, we'll have Robert and the ACM to sort of get into the fray of things in terms of helping us coordinate a public response to the request of the park, renaming of the park. I think we got a good start. This is not to take place tomorrow, nor the next month. I think you're right. COVID is still among us. And I think we need to be very, very careful about our in-person. So Zoom has helped tremendously. Robin, Dr. Thompson, you all have helped us tremendously today. That's why we asked you all to come. Thank you all so very, very much. Our city manager.
Yes, sir.
Ms. Wilson.
Yes.
Would you like to say something in closing?
I think Mr. Davis had his hand raised too, Ms. Reverend McDowell.
I'm sorry.
I do have some clarification points, but go ahead, Mr. Davis.
No, I'm just, as I sort of hinted, I kind of go way back with some of the history on this, but I'm just impressed with the research that has been done. It kind of tells, from my perspective, it tells you a lot that it was the people and the workers and not necessarily the stars that made that facility work. And its contribution is that it really paved the way for people to become deinstitutionalized and be integrated back into society. That was my foundation with it. So I think at the end of the day, when these or whatever story is told, people will have a deep appreciation for it.
Yes,
Great.
sir.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Wilson?
Reverend McDowell, I just want to make sure we have our marching orders clear. And as Henry and Robert, go to work on the public input aspect, it sounds like that you all want to still capture this historical theme or individuals who have had some type of connection to Bull Street and or DMH. And so I think when you do put it out to the public, to the point of, is it an individual that, yes, it sounds like you want an individual, not a theme or a name of the part that's a theme, but an individual. I'm asking that question for clarity. And then
I don't think it necessarily has to be an individual. It could be what the lady wanted it named People's Park or something like that. The stadium.
That's correct. Yeah. Well, People's Park.
It could be the People's Park, and then we have a series of markers or some sort of things like we have down Main Street to speak to the different families that have had input into the Bull Street property. That might be one thing.
Well, if that's the case, I think then that's why I'm asking, because when you put something out to the public, I know it sounds good and I'm all for it, and I understand everyone's transparency and everything, but you also get back, you have to put it out in a way for what you want to receive back.
Well, if
versus
it's not,
a whole hodgepodge of ideas. And
if it's an individual, the individual's got to be dead, and we would like to have the individual with a significant connection to the Bull Street property, to the mental health services provided on the Bull Street property, to the building of the buildings on the Bull Street property, to the 200-year history of mental health in South Carolina.
But that doesn't rule. That doesn't rule out a theme. I think that's what Ms. Wilson is.
Yeah, I don't
That
think
does not rule out a theme. Is that correct?
That's my understanding.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we're looking at significant points in the park where a person's name, where we could identify whether it's a bench or whether it's a marker with a person's name there. That does not rule out a theme for that park.
Well, Councilman McDowell, that's why I mentioned specifically when I mentioned, so Modjeska Simkins is a name now much better known in Columbia, but she was in charge of a group called the Richland County Citizens Committee. And the reason why I mentioned that was because you could easily, and if you want to move in this theme direction, still keep to the history by creating a space called Citizens Park that references this historic organization that pushed for improved mental health intervention of African residents of Columbia. And so it aligns itself with what Ms. Sims told me about a people's park does not acknowledge as one person, but a collective. I'm always careful about naming after people dead or alive because that becomes a real political a dance as well.
Absolutely.
And I think for the committee, I'm just giving my observations from listening. I'm all for you putting it out there. I just think you need to have some parameters around what you're trying to receive back. So if you are looking more for an overarching theme, similar to what Dr. Donaldson just said, I think you've got to put some themes out there because you could get any kind of, you want to put out there some ideas of what it is to the exact idea, the exact example that Dr. Donaldson just gave, Citizens Park. I really think you should just I think you should put out examples and let the public and the citizens weigh in on the examples so you don't start getting too much. I think you let them weigh in on those examples and maybe have an additional method for them to provide their own ideas as well, but it certainly needs to be in line with what you're trying to achieve. Mm-hmm. I'm not a fan of just putting it out there blanketly. I'll just be honest, because I think we're going to get into it's going to move away from the potentially what you've talked about on this phone call.
Yeah, I think we've covered a lot of ground, but in what appears to be the conclusion of today's discussion, my opinion, I don't have a problem. I think I could be supportive of the Citizens Park, but the outcome of that could be, since we've really outlined some significant contributions people have made to that property and to mental health in the state, that you could include individual histories, as we've pretty much discussed this morning. Whether it's in a park, Citizens Park, or whether it's in that park, and you strategically point out the contributions of the people that we've talked about today. I think you can encapsulate all of that. If it's Citizens Park or if it's Modjeska Simkins Park, whatever. Modjeska Simkins has a story. So that's where my head is. I don't have a problem.
Well,
I don't have a problem with it.
I mean, I've listed 17 names here, and each one of those names have made significant contributions to the Bull Street property. Something could very well be said about each one of these persons. Dr. Donaldson has done, and both Dr. Donaldson and Robin has done a good job in telling us something about these folks. So each one of the folks have a significant piece of history in their lives and in the lives of this city of ours. I think it gives us an opportunity, and I think it's a two-pronged approach. We've identified 17 persons. Perhaps there'll be more. I think to put on the table perhaps some themes as an example in using our website. But I think we could probably utilize both of these things, the names and a theme perhaps. So it gives us some work to do.
Why don't you let Robert and Henry put together some criteria and run it by the city manager?
That'd be great.
To see if they are getting in the ballpark.
That'd be great. That'd be great. I'm sure if it was left up to me, my theme would be Ed McDowell's Fun Park. Amen. And I don't back away from that. But I'm still living.
That's right.
I'm still living. I think it gives us an opportunity, Robert and Henry, to sort of look through this and allow the city manager to sort of look into this with what we get and what we could put out there for folks to see.
Very good meeting, Mr. Chairman.
Robert, I think Robert had his hand raised.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Robert. Yes, sir.
No, you wrapped it up for me. The only thing I might add would be, I think Manager Wilson's comment about it being just a free for all is how we get the respondents, how we work through the respondents. Those are the details that I think your point's right. That Henry and I can brainstorm some ideas, take them to Teresa and the team, and really not launch into anything without having a good understanding of. It sounds like we know what we want to ask for, but how we ask for it, what we do with it, and how it comes back. And maybe we put out all 14 names from today and ideas, and we say, here, comment on these and give us some others, and we just have one round of input. I don't know. I think that we put together one idea before we knew all these names were going to be coming together from Dr. Donaldson and Robin, and so now it's how we merge it all together. It seems like everybody's pretty much in agreement that we probably can't go wrong with any one of the 14, and there's a good way to get some positive coverage and press and input from the public. So let's do it, and I'm excited. I think it'll be really fun.
Well, I think it gives us an opportunity to not only be transparent in our understanding of what we want to do and to rename the park, but also gives folk an understanding in terms of our community residents, an opportunity to say this is good and this is not. And I think that's the thrust of what we want to do and how we do it. The committee, of course, will wait on Robert. The committee will wait on you and assistant city manager to kind of come through, start that process of talking through how we need to do this. And of course, we will get together again to see what you all come up with. This is a slow but significant and meaningful project. So we don't want to do it haphazardly. We want to make sure we think through this thing very thoroughly.
Henry
Thank you.
had his hand up.
Who's that saying? Oh, I'm sorry. Henry.
Yeah, no problem. Just real quickly, I just wanted to really thank Dr. Donaldson, myself, as well as Robin for all the work that they did in putting this together. I thought that information was amazing. And I think, as Ms. Wilson has shared, I think we need to be clear in messaging to the public. Those examples, I think, is spot on. That'll help us kind of narrow down how we deliver the message to the public. So I will really solicit, I would like to solicit the help of Dr. Donaldson as well as Robin on what we come up with before I bring that back to the city manager for review, if that's okay with Dr. Donaldson. I don't want to put any more work on you, but I just would like your eyes as well as Robin, because you all are subject matter experts on this. So we would like to kind of see, or I'd like you to see what we come up with, if that's okay.
Henry, my response is where you lead, I'll follow. Okay.
I appreciate that.
Great. the check is in the mail for you and Robin, okay?
I'll be waiting for it,
Looking
Councilman.
However you need
Member
it.
McDowell, are you looking to meet again in about 2 weeks?
Yes.
With the initial or?
Yes, ma'am. What I'd like
Okay.
to do after talking to Howard and Sam, if we could start at least talking about this with Henry and Robert, and say in 2 weeks, we get back together again to kind of see where we are.
Okay.
How about that?
Robert, Henry, is that good for you both? Yep, okay.
And
Yeah.
Robert, just tell Chandler we need her on the call the next time. Not that,
Yeah,
not
Teresa's asking the wrong person. She should say, is that good for Chandler's schedule?
Okay. Let me say just a word of thanks. Thank you all again for your insightful participation. Thank you all again for all of the knowledge that you've imparted upon each one of us. Robin, thank you very much. Dr. Donaldson, thank you very much for both of you all's continued gifts of helping us walk through this. I think it's very meaningful that we have these kinds of conversations. Thank you all so much. Henry, thank you. City Manager, thank you.
Thank you.
Y'all go well. Stay well.
Yes,
Thank you.
everyone, stay safe.
Thank you all.